Signs of the Southland. Mr. Grant, what is the drunkest football game you have ever been at? Maybe not just football game, sporting event. Let's call it a sporting event.
Like the game was drunk or I was drunk?
The former, although I think there's something to unpack in the latter later off the air.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say you know as well as I that I can't drink on game days, or until this coming year. But
Used to.
the drunkest football game in terms of gameplay I've ever been to. The first thing that came to mind was a Tennessee game at Mercedes-Benz, but I think a much better answer to that is the Miami or Virginia games to close 2018. Because
Mm.
those games had no business being interesting or compelling, but yet I think the Virginia game had like a touchdown return or a kick return for a touchdown, or maybe it was punt, like a bunch of safeties. The game was won on a missed field goal in overtime.
Oh yeah, the UVA one
Anyone
was
like
definitely dumb.
them
It was,
threatening
it
the
was
student
dumb.
section and then fumbling, muffing a Presley Harvin punt that we picked up and scored on. The 2018 season was weird, man.
Yeah, it was. I mean, cover to cover, very strange. Thinking about it now,
Oh,
especially having to go to Detroit to cap it off.
well, that's the season that started with you stand when they stand. So you know, ugh.
We don't have to relive that. We don't have to relive that. The only reason I bring this up, and you know where I was going with this, is because the drunkest sporting event that I have ever watched, or have had the honor and privilege of watching, was the United States men's national soccer team playing Mexico in the CONCACAF Nations League final last night. And dear God, 3 hours of absolute mess, absolute just carnage on my television. I've never seen a game get that just off the rails in my, 23 and a half years of life at this point. That is just, it is absurd how messy that got.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't necessarily watching it, but we have not suffered from a lack of sports the past few weeks. I think is a general thing, and that seems like a nice little cherry on top.
Cherry on top is not the precise phrase I would use to describe this game, although I will give you that winning a trophy at the end of it was particularly nice. I
I,
will give you that. But
I was going to say
um,
our boys beat El Tribe, but
El Tree, come
I
on,
feel
don't be that Chicagoan.
I feel dirty claiming anything of fandom for them, knowing I don't know, you very much care more than I do, and I feel like I'm infringing on that to say anything with a possessive pronoun in front of it. But in general, a win over uh, is it accurate to say our biggest rivals is always a
Yes.
good way to end a night, and you got a trophy for it. So good work.
Yes, it doesn't matter. It matters not that it's an entirely fake tournament made up for money reasons by a confederation that actively hates its American partners. But that there's a lot more to unpack than we have for a 30 to 45-minute podcast there.
That also may not be why our valued and dear listeners are here, because they come to listen to us shit post about Georgia Tech. So yeah.
Look, if they want an episode about this USA Mexico game, and I encourage people to at least go look up the highlights on CBS Sports YouTube channel, or I think they've posted the full match stream at this point. Please go watch it. Take 2 or 3 hours out of your day, or afternoon or night, to sit and watch the whole thing and just marvel at the absolute mess that your television becomes.
I mean,
Just
it was a day for absolute messes. It began in Azerbaijan with whatever the heck the end of the Baku Grand Prix was. It had the CONCACAF final. We'll dig into Nashville here.
Yeah, oh yeah, we got stuff to talk about. We have 2 games to talk about in Nashville.
Yeah, it's it was a week in terms of sports, and then we can always circle back. But I would like to say, if you're plugging them going to CBS and whatnot to watch highlights, feel free, listeners, if you ever have anything you think would interest me or Akshay to talk about on the show, feel free to DM it at us, DM it at From the Rumble Seat, etc. Before we dive into sports, I would like to say, thanks to a reader submission, we did figure out what that sketchy door was under Peter's parking deck. Did we not?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. And now, because I did not prepare for you to bring this up, I have to go look up the explanation unless you have it on
Oh,
hand.
I got the like 5-word gist, and it is that it's functional. I think on the return to for steam condensate to the Archibald steam plant, which is you guys probably most famously know as the source of the whistle. So not
My source here says it's the Holland plant, actually.
Holland plant. Wait, what did I say? Archibald?
Yes.
Isn't that its first name? I don't know. I did the building bracket, and there's some building called Archibald right there that I've never been in. I'm pretty sure the same thing, but we're all
now he's looking it up. Now, great job, great job, unknown listener or unknown reader.
Holland Central Heating Plant. There we go.
Okay, so both right.
That's the best kind of right.
No, technically correct is the best kind of correct. Okay, we need to move on. We need to move on. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about. Let's start with the news items, shall we?
Yeah.
Just a couple of notes to talk about at the top. Track has NCAA championships next week, or I guess at the end of this week. Wow, I did not change that from last week, so that's my bad. So that is the 9th through the 12th. We have Nicole Fegans and Bria Matthews representing Tech there. Women's tennis news: ITA All-American teams were announced. Vicky Flores and Kenya Jones were named All-Americans as both singles and then also as a doubles pairing. So congrats to them. And then in an interesting, I guess, changing world of football and the NCAA's relationship with athletes and yada, 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 came an announcement about the 404 Academy for name, image, and likeness development as legislation in Georgia on that topic gets set to take effect on July 1st. The TLDR here is that each week there will be a session. Each week of June, there will be a session for Tech student athletes walking through a specific part of the name, image, and likeness, or NIL landscape, and the opportunities that they have available to them as part of the landscape. Tech is bringing in a lot of experts, faculty, alumni with expertise in the fields of branding, marketing, innovation, finance, taxation, and entrepreneurship, end quote, from, it's a lot of stuff, one to read and also one to digest, especially as some of this legislation comes down the pipe. Some of this, like, very NCAA shaking in their boots style legislation. So let's put a pin in the updates for now, but let's talk about this for a minute. What are your thoughts about this camp? These seminars, what are we doing here?
Well, just from a casual observer point of view, not so much on the camps, clinics, lessons, autographs, personal branding stuff, but personal finance and entrepreneurship, no matter how much money you're making off of this kind of stuff, those are going to be valuable experiences, like that, just outside of, obviously athletes come here to get an education and do well in sports and yada yada, but we talk about being a total person, and we talk about nutrition and medicine, but personal finance, entrepreneurship, those are very broad-based skills that I think every athlete could potentially benefit from, regardless of say you're your sixth court tennis player is not going to be putting on a ton of camps, you know?
I don't know, actually. Like, think about it. You have a lot of, like, as a student, as a regular student, not necessarily a student athlete, you have a lot of opportunities to make money as a on the side whenever you go home for the summer, right? You
Heck,
can
you can even
tutor younger kids for the SAT. You could tutor them in math or something. You can like if you do know a sport or you know an instrument, you can tutor kids in those. So I don't think it's far fetched to say, hey, to for an athlete like a D, like in your example, the sixth court tennis player, to go back to their hometown over the summer and say, hey, I'm a D1 tennis player. I'm good enough to play D1 and play in the NCAA tournament, especially in the women's tennis case. Do you want specialized training? And then make money off of that. I think that's an entirely valid option for them.
Yeah, that's fair. And to piggyback on your point, I did just remember that, like for example, Tech Varsity Swim and Dive does a like a camp every summer. So
So does football, so does basketball, so does baseball. Like, but all those camps, and there's also coaches clinics. But all that revenue goes towards athletics.
yeah,
It's not given to the athletes if they're helping put on the camp or otherwise. So this gives them an opportunity to sort of develop those entrepreneurial skills, those personal finance skills, et cetera, and also, restores their image rights, their financial, their like marketing rights as a athlete or as a student that every regular student has.
yeah. I was going to add something on top of that. Shoot. Um, Spitball here for a second. It was a good point.
We put this under football just because I think when we talk about NIL, a lot of the discussion points that come up or a lot of the discourse is mainly centered around football players and say,
Yep.
hey, they can put their name on a billboard for a car dealership in their hometown, back wherever they're from, and make money off of that. Or they can put their name, like the number one QB recruit can sign an endorsement deal with a truck dealership in the city of the school that he's going to, et cetera, et cetera. Because those football players, the star football players, are probably going to be on the higher end of the earning spectrum. But I think it's not just football that's going to benefit from this. I think one of the points that's been made is that in a lot of the non-revenue, and especially in the women's sports where social media followings and influencers and maybe even using um, certain athletic equipment or certain products, like that stuff, the stuff that Olympic athletes, or that those Olympic athlete endorsement type deals that we see in Olympic sports,
Yeah.
those might also become popular. Those might be revenue drivers in areas where schools don't necessarily consider those sports to be athletic department revenue drivers.
Yes. And I think something like that you did see, especially in the post London, post Rio world, a lot of big name swimmers having to consider, hey, am I going to stay an amateur or am I going to take endorsement deals? Like,
We saw it in swimming with Missy Franklin,
yeah,
right? She
that's
swam for
exactly.
what, 2 years at Colorado,
Yeah.
and then she went to London, if I remember correctly, swam 2 years at Colorado, turned pro, and then went to Rio.
Yep, that is exactly who I was talking about, but not explicitly naming. But someone like that, bingo banga bongo. Now you can have a career and the college experience, I guess. And I think from like a tennis swimming perspective, keeping some of those top talents with the potential to stay in college could actually improve the quality of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
like think about. It's just think about the type of people that go pro. right? I mean, think about the amount of people that go pro, and especially it's hard to break into some of those circuits. Especially, I mean, there's not really a pro swimming scene other than the TYR series and some of those other club series.
Actually, we're coming up on season 2 or 3 of an ISL International Swimming League, but you probably have not heard of it because it's hard to watch them and they don't really come to America that much. So,
Which also still serves my point, despite them having like what entirely or like half American franchises, quote unquote.
yeah, I think season 2 was entirely in Budapest or something along those lines.
But but especially like in tennis and golf,
Yes.
I think golf is the most direct example, right? It's hard to get a PGA Tour card.
Yep.
It is very difficult to get a PGA Tour card. So anything that helps keep some of that talent that goes pro still in the college ranks, like you said, that is good for the game, regardless of what game you're playing.
Yes, and a couple tech examples there. The dilemma, say, an Andy Ogletree or Tyler Strafacci, or going back a couple years, Chris Eubanks in the tennis world. Not saying that would change their decisions. I don't have any say or any exposure into that kind of thing, but it might change the calculus for someone like that and someone who wants to finish out the degree. The point I was going to make before when I was like spitball. Was that Georgia Tech has explicitly said they're not going to use the school can pool 75% of your income in some pot that the Georgia NIL legislation said, which I'm very pleased about. Again, to editorialize a little bit, I think Georgia Tech does a good job of building up our individuals and helping them succeed, and I think that's probably waiting for your take on this, but for the best, in my humble opinion.
I'm very cynical when it comes to state of Georgia law. I think that is the most polite way I can say it. I am pleased in Tech's response to not applying that specific part of what seemed to be a very poorly written piece of legislation, other than the basic benefit of allowing NIL deals.
Comment: Didn't they sign that law at Sanford Stadium?
Yes. Well, they signed it in Athens. I don't know about specific location, but yes.
And it's just not even subtle sometimes, is it?
Nope. Not at all. Well, we have again more to unpack in that specific. So much more to unpack with our angst, with specific representatives of the institutions that run college athletics in this state.
Us angst? Never. We never have angst. There's nothing to be angsty about. Not at all.
Just to close the loop on the actual seminars, Tech did provide a weekly schedule for on ramblinrec.com. Week 1, which I guess is this week, is an introduction and overview, because 2 is personal branding, 3 is camps, clinics, lessons, and autographs, 4 personal finance, and 5 is entrepreneurship. And I believe at the end of week 5, that is when the legislation goes into effect. This is all, if I remember correctly, run through Tech's partnership with Influencer, which is spelled INFLCR, because using vowels other than I in names for companies and startups is fake. So yeah, you can check all that out on ramblingrec.com.
I mean,
Is it time?
I was going to say, if you don't drop the E between the second to last consonant and the R, you're just not a startup. So I'm glad we're with the best.
I am actually pretty sure that is a cardinal rule of VC funding. And if you don't, you get blocklisted from all VC funds in Silicon Valley.
What's the difference between blocklisted and blockchain? Do you know?
We're not doing this. I'm not falling for the bait here.
All right. What do you got next then?
Are you ready to talk about how many baseball games? Four baseball games from this weekend.
No, I'm not.
Okay, we'll try to get through this in as minimal emotional pain as possible. I think we can skip one of them, the third one, because of how it went. But so the first one, which was Friday at 1 p.m., that was versus Indiana State. I don't have the final score in front of me because I'm a bad podcaster. But that was a late win versus Indiana State. Tech was able to pull it out near the end. But I think it's safe to say Brent Herter had a bit of a tough time on the mound in the middle part of that game. And Tech just kind of left him out there for a bit. And it was kind of scary.
That seems to be a theme, kind of this year. I don't know whether you can call it a slow hook or a no hook. There are definitely some times when our pitchers are squirming in the wind a little bit, but it's I don't know. Not that we don't have any good answers behind him, but in the first game of a regional, when one of the most consistent, actually probably the most consistent pitcher you have, just he needs to eat innings or figure it out, because he can do both. He has the ability to figure it out. So I don't hate the decision.
Yeah, I don't. It's. I don't think it's as like there have been more serious, more controversial ones, right? Like there's other ones that we can talk about in this context, but this one was just dicey. It wasn't dangerous. It was, well, I guess those are kind of fall into place, but it was just very. Is not. I would have probably, like you said, I probably would have had a bit of a quicker hook. And I do have the score pulled up. It was 7-6, Georgia
Yes,
Tech.
sir.
Now I'm pulling up the box score. This was a very, very good performance for Jeremy Guerrero of Indiana State. I really want to give him some props because he gave Tech problems the entire day, and I felt the whole game was predicated on Indiana State's ability to squeeze innings out of Guerrero, and then also Guerrero's ability to force like long flyouts or ground ball outs from this team.
Of which there were many of both of those. It wasn't like Tech wasn't connecting with the ball, because there was definitely a how you say a knack for hitting balls either at fielders or not quite out of the yard, and I think that probably extends to the second game too, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I didn't catch a ton of the second game myself, but if I pull up the box score here, the second game was 4-3, Vandy in this case. This was the nightcap on Saturday. And taking a look at the box score here, you had a really, honestly, considering the opponent, a really strong start from Marquise Grissom Jr. 4 runs looks bad on the stat sheet. Like I think that's pretty obvious, but none of them were earned. He went four and I think the worst bit is that he just got into a jam after 4 innings of good work, and the bullpen wasn't able to completely bail him out of it. But I think Dalton Smith gets some credit here for being able to carry the rest of the way and limit the damage
Yeah,
especially late on.
yeah, I would agree. The important stat about those 4 runs, though, is that none of them were earned. I don't want to
Absolutely.
let that slip by without coming back. That it is very tough to look back at that game. And yes, it was 4-1 going into the ninth, 2-run home run. But like those are preventable things. If they're not earned runs, it's not from a plentiful contact from Vandy that was doing it.
Yeah. Let's talk about it, because this is the oh boy, I'm trying to find where it lists the inning. So this is the 5th inning. It starts with a single, then a fielder's choice, but the runner at first is thrown out at second. Or is it thrown out at second? Oh, it's complicated. And then a hit by pitch, then a fielder's choice that allows a runner to advance on a throwing error, then advance again to score, and then another runner scores. Both of those runs are unearned. Then another pitcher comes in. There's another error, another throwing error that allows a runner to advance, and then a couple of strikeouts end the inning. But those are two of your runs right there. And if I scroll up to find out where the other ones were, there is another error. That looks like another error. No, it's a hit by pitch that then leads to another unearned run, and then there's another wild pitch that leads to an unearned run. So just not. I think obviously some of the wild pitch stuff is on Grissom, but the rest of the there were three other runs there that are not directly he's not directly culpable for, right?
Yep.
Baseball scoring is weird. It's not intuitive.
It's tough, especially when you're going up against a team with pitchers who are not going to give you free runs, right? That it seems like Georgia Tech, which has been a theme throughout the season, the walks, hit by pitches, and errors in the field have just either cascaded, given them free outs, whatever, spoiled good counts. These are things that can pile up real quickly, and that was absolutely what we saw in the second game, because they all kind of rained and poured in at the same time.
I think the important part is that they were still in this one, right? I mean, they were down. It was 4-1 going into this would have been the top of the ninth, right?
Yeah.
No, bottom of the ninth. They were the home team. Were they?
We were the home team in game 4.
Okay. So they were the away team in this one, and it's very unclear from the website. It says the Vandy's website says two different things. So they were down 4-1 heading into the top of the ninth, and then Drew Compton, if I remember correctly, it's a 2-run homer to make it interesting with 2 outs in the inning.
Which, it's worth noting, shattered a windshield. So good work.
Oh, it was very, very deep home run. And it got interesting, right? And I think this team has a propensity to make it interesting late into games. And interesting, especially for your cardiac health. Let me tell you.
This last month of the season aged us horribly, I think, as Tech fans.
Mm-hmm.
And between that, basketball having a heck of a year, whew, it was a busy spring, and we can unpack this more later. I'm not going to take a left turn into that. I think, obviously, morals of the story that we've been talking about all year include the walks, the accuracy, the fielding errors. Good teams, or teams that go to the College World Series, don't make a lot of those preventable mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other specific takeaway from this game, which I think is a lesson that everyone should learn at some point, is don't park your car next to a baseball stadium.
How about having an active street or a throughway next to a baseball stadium? Does that help?
Well, pot called kettle black here, but I don't think that's too wise either. But there's certain things you can't prevent, i.e. needing to drive past a baseball stadium, and there's certain things you can. Like, you just got to know better. Don't park next to a baseball stadium. I'm trying to think of other sports metaphors here, but that's an obvious one. If you have one, please bail out this bit. But yeah, no.
Yeah, we're gonna move on so I can bail you out here. Let's move on to Game 3. I think this was a very complete performance, and I think Indiana State, who's the opponent here, suffered a lot for not having Guerrero available.
Oh, for sure.
And the most important part here is Tech only burned one pitcher in this game. Archer had a complete game shutout with only 4 hits, 3 walks, and 7 strikeouts with 1 hit by pitch. But he did it in 121 pitches, and Danny Hall let him have it too. So
Yep.
this was a very, very good performance, especially if you wanted to go into the next day, you wanted to have arms available to play at least one game. You needed this performance, and it was very, very well managed and very well done. Just to give you an idea of what the bullpen situation had looked like, if I can pull back up the box scores from the other 2 games. So in the first game, Tech burned. Herder obviously was started, so he wasn't going to be available. Crawford had 3 pitches. Maxwell had 18. Siegel got the win and had win on 2 pitches because that makes sense. And Bartnicki got a save on 24 pitches. So you're looking at Crawford, Maxwell. I mean, you're looking at Crawford being available the next day potentially, but Maxwell not being available the next day, maybe. Siegel being available, and then Bartnicki maybe not being available the next day. And then you go into the first game versus Vanderbilt, and Tech burns Grissom, obviously, and then Maxwell comes back, and then Smith also gets used for 54 pitches. I skipped one game, maybe? No? Let's move on to the second game versus Indiana State. Obviously, they only use Archer. So now you basically have a bunch of bullpen pitchers available to burn at least in the first game against Vanderbilt, or the first regional final game versus Vanderbilt. And now let's talk about this game 6. You were the one that watched this cover to cover. So walk me through the first couple of innings, couple of situations here.
Well, we went up. Was it 3-1, 3-0? Anyways, we poured in runs at the start, and I was like, "All right, easy game. We're gonna win this by 1,000,000 runs." But then,
did you actually? Please tell me you knew better. You did not actually say that.
This is Georgia Tech baseball, my man. This is Georgia Tech sports. I've learned. The game ain't over till it's over. And that's the beauty of baseball, right? Everyone gets their 27 outs. We looked effective at the plate. We were hitting, but their starter settled in, and it's tough. They slowly whittled their way back. Some shenanigans, some hits. We were lucky in a couple instances that their home runs were solo home runs. I'm also thinking of later in the game because
it was not a solo home run later in the game.
Well, the middle later of the game, Vandy did wind up going 7-4. They scored several unanswered runs, but Tech rallied for 5 in the 6th.
Bottom of the 5th.
Putting us up 8-7, highlighted by a beautiful bomb. Which, if there was one thing we did, and granted, it could have been a little bit more timely and a little bit more, but hitting on Sunday was quite good. In fact, to just touch on the Indiana State thing really quick, that could have been even more out of hand even earlier. I believe we went down with the bases loaded in the bottom of the first, already winning by 4. So yes, the bats came to play on Sunday. But yeah, and then there's some hope again. But as we got deeper into the night, obviously we knew, with it being more of a bullpen game, that it was going to be a tough ride. Shaky hold on to the lead, 2 solo home runs later, up until it's the bottom of the 9th. This is all very rambly. For those of you who weren't there, it was down to 2 outs as well. And the game-tying home run. I know that this is all very rambly. As it got later, I was definitely a little bit more incoherent. But Compton coming through with a very timely dinger again. Would have been nice to have someone on base, but can't ask for everything. I think we would have been in definitely an interesting scenario had the game ended and we had to play again tonight. This also would have made this a live show, so who knows how that would have gone.
I think we would have just delayed another day.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, no, in extras, the 10th was pretty smooth sailing for Georgia Tech, but the 11th was decidedly not. We didn't really have much going on at the plate in the 10th. There's no easy way to say this, but we gave up 5 runs in the 11th through a combination of walks and dingers and other.
Well, to be fair, it was 1 dinger. Well, 2 dingers and a bunch of walks, and it was kind of started when Josiah Siegel got hit with a comebacker with, I think, 2 men on and had to come out of the game. And then Danny Hall goes to the bullpen and brings in John Medich, who can't get an out in 13 pitches thrown, and allows 2 runs, or both earned on 2 walks. And then he goes to Sam Crawford, who's able to get 2 outs, but I think one of those is a part of, or both of those are part of the grand slam. And then Dawson Brown is able to clean things up with the last out, but it takes him 3 batters to get that out. So it's a combination of just you ran out of arms. I think that's what it was. You ran out of you just ran out of arms. It happens, right? This was a bullpen game. You just didn't have anyone else that you could use. You had to go to you had to go to whatever options you had.
Well, and the problem there too. Well, I think Siegel got nailed. Well, if he hadn't gotten nailed, that probably was a fieldable ground ball, if not from him or someone behind him, which is tough because that's an out you're giving away. He's pitching well.
I mean, to be fair, he'd given up a couple of walks, but it was still, game is tied. You're starting to get into a high leverage situation, but it's manageable. Like, you can pitch your way out of this. You can, it's possible that if the comebacker didn't hit him, that's a double play ball, right? Like you're saying. So it just snowballed, I think. As soon as he got hit, things were a little unsettled. And then you have to go to arms that maybe don't have as much time on the field throughout the season. They're not as proven. And it was just a bit of a slog from there on.
I would like to correct it. Actually, as I noted, the single to the pitcher, as they note in the score, in this box score, was the first play of the inning. So there was no one on base when he got nailed by the comebacker. No outs.
Oh, really? I thought there was at least one person on base.
Nope, there's no one on base. He was the first batter. And then Medich walked the next 2 guys.
And then got pulled.
Well, because at one point they were trying to bunt the runners who were on first and second over, but the runners got wild pitched over anyways. Crawford comes in, strikes out a guy, the first guy he saw, and then blammo, grand slam on the second guy. Then there was another swinging strikeout this time, followed by a double. And after that, Mr. Brown did come in to pitch. Then there was another double, then a walk, and then some shenanigans in the field. There were some steals, wild pitches. And then the inning mercifully ended 53 minutes later with a ground out. So setting the record straight with that one. But the point...
It was a 5-hour game, all right? 5-hour game.
Yeah. It runs together at some point,
especially if you've been watching soccer for the last 3 hours of it, like I was.
What was I going to say? The reason I was a little bit vague earlier is because I was trying to like fly through it, and at some point, a 5-hour, 11-inning game, the stuff runs together. But to your point, the thing I wanted to circle back to on running out of arms. This year of all years, when you have an expanded roster due to COVID, you have the wonder kid pitching coach, Mr. Danny Burrell, having a full year with the staff. I think our expectations were correctly set at the beginning of the year to expect more out of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the hitting wasn't really the problem this year.
I mean, it was boom. I think it was boom or bust. Let's be clear.
Well,
But at the
and some
same
of that,
time, that's the way
some of
that
that comes
hitting
back to
has
roster
been
decisions
always.
too, Akshay. Some of that comes back to roster decisions too. Like, hey, Colin Hall has only played in one game in the last 2.5 months. Let's now throw him into some of the highest leverage at-bats he's going to see in his entire career. Like, that doesn't
Podcasting visual medium, I am shrugging right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not expecting you to have answers or comments, but like the speed of which pitchers were hooked, the development of the staff. These are all things that I think they can reasonably take steps to improve for next year. Because, I mean, something has to change, right? You need to be more consistent at the plate. You need to be, to quote the director of morale, which is a
God,
follow. You have to play the best 9. Like, if you want to win, you have to play the best 9.
Well, I don't even think roster decisions are not my forte, or at least hitting lineup decisions are not my forte. So I'm gonna set those aside for now. There's not necessarily something I can.
I want to ask you a question before you get into this.
Okay.
Who was the staff, the coaching staff, Danny Hall, whoever's pick to click or most improved offseason player? The one who they were going to start at this position of question coming into this year.
Jake Holland, a catcher?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised that I got that one right, but also, yeah, Jake Holland is no longer on the roster? Question mark.
I believe he's transferring. But my point is, that was a serious question from the first couple weeks of the year is, hey, this Parada kid's playing really well.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be the starter, or are we just going to
rotate?
Do this half-heartedly, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have to give him credit, right? That was the right decision.
Yep.
The data proved itself out there.
And the tougher thing is that the decision's not quite so clear at some of these other positions, right? Some of these pitching roles, the roster spots, whether you're going to favor a defense or batting, or whether the batting is on fire or it's not.
Or God forbid you use a shift. I'm gonna tamp down my anger about that one, but we can come back to that later on at a different podcast.
They have actual IEs in their stats department though, so got that going for us.
Okay, well, let me get to the point that I was going to make, because what I was going to say is hitting lineup decisions are a little bit beyond.
Nebraska just blew it. Sorry, this is a live podcast. We're talking college baseball. Arkansas is going on. Goodbye, Nebraska.
Nebraska ball?
Yeah, no, Nebraska ball.
Nebraska ball. Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, moving on. So lineup decisions are not necessarily my forte, right? It's hard, like you said, it's hard to sort of eke out or mete out the quality of a lineup, because even the best hitters only hit 33% of the time, or get a hit 33% of the time. For pitching, I think it's a little easy. It's a little easier to sort of mete out the quality because the results are there. You can see the balls and strike called in front of you. You can evaluate control and quality pitching a little easier, even if you're more of a novice. And from what I was looking at, I think we were doing really well in sort of the pitching speed department, the power department, some of the not even some of the movement stuff, but just being able to blow college hitters away with pitches. But at the same time, some of the control that we'd seen in past staffs, even if that control was a little awry at times, was not there, right? I think we've seen a ton more wild pitches. I guess anecdotally, I'd have to go back to actually confirm it, but a ton more wild pitches this year. a ton more situations where pitchers were just sort of losing the strike zone for a bit. It seemed a little just uncharacteristic for what we've come to expect from the staff. Obviously, we've come to expect up and down bullpen performances over the years, but this was an up and down in a different way where I felt like part of it was there, the speed was there, the control had not developed in kind. And so as we move forward into next season, as we have all this technology in the new training area for baseball, measuring spin rate and able to do all this trajectory analytics, that's what I want to see. I want to see the application of some of those. I want to see more movement, more control, rather than just trying to win on speed and power, which is what at times it felt like this year.
Yeah. It was the pitching equivalent of all gas and no brakes, I think.
Yeah. It was at times a mess, and I think we saw the worst of it late on. Just sometimes you're just not able to get strikes when you need to, and it's tough, right? Sometimes it's your day, and sometimes it's not. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. I was gonna say the thing that was most obvious about this year was we didn't have a Connor Thomas like ace in the hole, or Xavier Curry a second. We didn't have a 1-2 that was quite that caliber. And like when you saw Tristan English was coming in to close a game or to pitch in the eighth, that was more reassuring.
It was a safety blanket, right? And,
yes.
I think we talked about that in the aftermath of the 2019 regional, right? That's why there was an entire debate. Do you let Connor Thomas pitch that last out, or pitch for that last out to complete the game by himself, or do you bring in Tristan English as cover as a fresh arm? And that's why the decision there was so difficult, because you have two proven commodities on the mound that, in my opinion, it was like, okay, I feel comfortable saying, Connor Thomas, you're at 95 pitches, finish the game, finish the job. You only need one more strike. And obviously it didn't work out, all that well in that instant, in that winner's bracket game that ended up in a walk-off. But the concept, right? The idea, the model there of having a starting pitcher that you trust to go 6-7, and then having a closer that you can trust to get at least 3 outs, if not 4 or 5. That model was proven there, and I agree. I don't necessarily think I can point to a similar pairing, because the pitching similar pairing in 2021, because the pitching performances were so scattered in terms of quality.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a lot to add to that either. You put it well.
Okay. I think we need to take another couple weeks, digest a little bit more, maybe prepare a little stuff, and come back to this with actual data, actual hard opinions, and maybe we'll do a grand recap episode at some point. But
yeah,
that's about it for us tonight. It's starting to get late here on the East Coast. So anything else before we sign off?
No, I can't think of anything. I don't know. We have a whole summer ahead to not be
cynics
uptight about Georgia Tech sports, and we can come back in the fall with maybe some fresh eyes and
more snark.
Yes. We want to be on our game for the podcasting, but also we want to enjoy it. So we'll see you
snark.
so
All right, cool. We'll see you all next week.